Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 230 of CryptoBiography. It is part 22 of Snake Magic, and it is the final part of Snake Magic. I hope you've been enjoying the story. I've been enjoying writing it quite a lot. I'm going to miss writing about Neidre and Hefrid and everyone else now that we're done with it. But, I'll have a few words to say at the end, but I think for right now, let's just get going. She did wait, but after what felt like a long time, it seemed like no one was going to request more food or investigate the strong wine. They could wait until they entered the manse to extricate Martha, but Neidre felt it would be an unneeded complication. Getting her out now would ensure that she could get away. She moved over to Martha's door and tapped very lightly on it. It opened almost immediately. Though the room was very small, Neidre could tell Martha had been waiting for her. "Got everything?" Neidre asked in a whisper. "Yes," Martha said. In the near total darkness, Neidre could barely tell that Martha had a small satchel slung over her shoulder. Martha had only exaggerated slightly. Everything she was taking wouldn't quite fit in one hand, but nearly. Neidre had her hold inside for a moment while she took the time to verify that no guards had decided to venture nearby. Once she had, she led Martha out to the orchard and introduced her to Hefrid, who soon handed her off to the scout, who would double as Martha's guard, and as their last-ditch chance in case of capture. Then Neidre went back close enough to the manse to see the light in the laboratory window. Would it remain lit all night, or would it go out and give them an opportunity to get the Nazrak? The answer came, though well past midnight. The lab light went out. Neidre went and confirmed that Hefrid and the others knew. They brought everyone except Martha and the scout, acting as her bodyguard. Neidre did her best to create camouflage for them all, though for it to work at all they had to move very slowly. Hefrid whispered at her to keep it up. Soon they were at the door. Being up a couple of steps made Neidre feel quite exposed. Her camouflage spell was quite weak here. So far, no one had come to the yard, though. She fixed on the door, and soon it had yielded as though turned to cloth. They pushed the door open, then let it close, though Neidre made sure it was not actually locked, in case they had to escape that way without her. She led them up the stairs, and was relieved to find that it was quite as straightforward as she had expected. They met no one, and came at length to the laboratory door. There was an oil lamp throwing some light in the hall, so Hefrid stopped them with a gesture and a hand on Neidre's shoulder to survey the scene. "Do they not set guards at the laboratory door?" she asked. "I wouldn't know," Neidre said. "Other than the one time I was sent here, I've never seen it. And I was never in a position to hear about estate security. We must be careful. There may be guards inside instead, watching the prisoners directly." She then had Neidre move ahead. Neidre listened intently at the door. No sound was to be heard. She turned and looked to Hefrid, who nodded. Neidre focused on the door. She made it soft, like cloth, and pushed. And some yells came from the room. Without looking to see their source, Neidre dropped down, knowing that the scouts might want to use their bows. She was right. Arrows sped over her head, and there were cries of pain from across the room. She had dropped forward, and though having her human torso on the ground was awkward, she pulled her tail in to clear the doorway for her compatriots. Hefrid slid in the room almost in a blur, and in a moment the yells from across the room were silent. Neidre realized how unready she was for combat, and silently thanked Hefrid. She looked over and saw 3 guards on the floor on the left side of the room. Opposite them were the 3 Nazrak, still chained. They were seated on the floor with chains going to staples. They had every appearance of being asleep before their saviors had barged in. They seemed absolutely stunned to see Nazrak in the laboratory. Neidre, going on the assumption that these were raised by humans and then sold to cavemen, and thus spoke the human tongue, asked, "Do you understand me?" They nodded. "Let's get you out of here. We're going on the run immediately, assuming you're fit for travel." "We can, and we will," said one. She was a female, with the other 2 being a female and a male. Who are you? Introductions later, Neidre said, concentrating on altering their shackles. But I am Neidre. The Neidre? The same Nazrak asked. I don't know what you mean, Neidre replied. She freed them. Let's get going. There was a noise behind them, and they saw a door, formerly hidden from view, slide open. Caedmon, the male Nazrak said as a full explanation. Go, Neidre said. Neidre focused on the air in front of Caedmon's door. Instantly became hazy, then smoky. The other Nazrak were out the door. Neidre made a move towards it as well, but saw a gout of flame burst out from her smoke, pushing it aside. She ducked out of the laboratory door and followed her Nazrak comrades. The Nazrak reached the ground floor. Knowing they'd been found out, they didn't bother waiting for Neidre to fully catch up. They slammed into it, and it sprang open, even damaging its hinges, making it sway drunkenly to the side as they poured out into the yard. And now Neidre had nearly caught up with them, only a tail's length from the wide-open door. Some signal may have been sent by Caedmon, for though she heard him pounding the stairs behind them even if she approached the door, it was from the first floor that his two apprentices, Garrick and Thorn, had appeared. Some sort of missile hissed past Neidre's head from the apprentices as she slid out of the door. She did not see it and did not slow down. They passed the well and were nearly on the far side of the yard, where the grass gave way to dirt. She saw ahead Martha and her scout at the very edge of the orchard. This wasn't exactly what they were supposed to do. Neidre was sure the plan had been to keep them at a safer distance, but this wasn't the time to argue the point. Behind them there were steps. Neidre glanced back. All three human sorcerers were on the grass, framed by the black rectangle of the open door. Then Caedmon held his apprentices back and raised a Nazrak orb in each hand, high overhead. Neidre kept slithering forward, but looking behind her, time seemed to slow as the horror of what she saw. A wave of golden-red fire, like Garrick's at the wagon train, but much larger, much brighter, and much deadlier looking, rolled forward towards them. The wave, which seemed to be about knee-depth on a human, sizzled the grass as it came. Neidre didn't know what else to do. Desperately, she turned and reached down, feeling the earth below her. She reached out with her magic and pulled up like the very earth was a blanket she was airing out. The ground in front of her bucked and lifted. On her side, it was almost vertical like a wall, but through her magic, she knew that on the other side, it was more like a ramp. If Caedmon could push the wave of fire at all, it might make it up over the ramp and down onto Neidre's head. She kept raising the earth and rocks, making the top of the ramp steeper and steeper, until it was actually past vertical. The golden wave of fire roared up the ramp and then sloshed over. From Neidre's point of view, she could see it curl back on itself. Caedmon could not push it past her ramp. She dared not relax her magic until the danger had passed. She knew this time was valuable, that she should be getting away, but also knew the wave of fire would delay any humans from chasing her. The wave of golden fire continued to spout up over the top of the ramp and back towards Caedmon's side. The light was so bright from it that Neidre had to squint. There was a shout, and suddenly the light coming from over the top of her ramp changed its color. In addition to the red gold, there was an orange flickering. The manse in the kitchen must be catching fire from the wave Neidre had redirected back toward Caedmon's estate. The shouting grew more intense, and many people were yelling. Neidre hoped that none of the slaves were hurt, though she dared not change her spell. Soon the wave stopped popping above her ramp. Neidre waited a few seconds in case there was a trick, then let the spell go. The top of the ramp, especially the part that went beyond the vertical, crumbled instantly. But the earth did not sag back to its original shape. Neidre didn't know if there was a void that had been created when she raised the ground and it had partly gotten filled in, or if her magic had somehow permanently altered the stone. But she was glad they were still out of sight of the humans. She turned and slithered as fast as she could. She expected her Nazrak brethren to be well ahead of her, but no, they had waited and been too shocked by what they had seen. Soon, though, they were off of Caedmon's estate. Hefrid called a halt and made sure everyone was all right. The new Nazrak were fine. Since their tails weren't able to be shackled, it was only their hands that had been bound, and while their wrists were terribly sore, They could travel just fine. Hefford made sure they had water and a quick bite to eat, then checked in with Neidre. Do they have tracking dogs? All slavers do, Neidre said simply. Well, they may be delayed by the buildings catching fire, and then again they may not, Hefford posited. We'll have to act as though they're coming as quickly as possible. They took off again. Neidre caught up to Martha and asked how she was doing. Thank you, Neidre, was all Martha said. I don't know how I lived so long without real hope. They listened for dogs and started to hear some in the distance. I don't think we'll be able to outrun them, and we only have a mile lead at most, Hefford said. We need to take advantage of the rest of the dark to go as far as we can. Soon one of our scouts, who had gone ahead, came back to them. She'd found a stream in the best possible direction, not far off. We're going to follow the stream for a while, Hefford said to Neidre. We'll cross it a few times to throw the dogs off the scent. It'll be hard to throw them off completely, though, because there's so many of us. Also because we have constant contact with the ground, she added. What if we didn't? Neidre asked. Can you levitate us? Hefford asked. No, Neidre said, but if we find some trees with branches reaching over the water, we might travel across the water without giving indication of it. We'll do that, Hefford said. Martha, can you climb? She could, and let Hefford know. And so it was they came to the stream. It was cold, but they forced themselves to cross it a few times as they traveled. And eventually they did find a place where the trees arced towards each other, and they were able to slither across without putting a foot near the water. It's possible that the humans with the dogs will figure out the trick by the fact that the scent is lost near a tree. As they walked away from the second tree, Neidre had a thought. She saw that their path would take them parallel to the creek for a while, then it seemed to veer away. Are we following that path? Neidre asked. We are for a while. Neidre let the others go ahead, then focused on the bed below the creek. She lifted it up, not so much as she had at Caedmon's estate, but enough to alter the flow of the creek. It started to flow over the path behind them, finding a new way. That should help, Hefford said, though it also means we need to hustle or we'll get wet ourselves. They did so, and eventually left the little path and went across a field. Looking back, Neidre could see glinting and hear rushing noises that told her the redirected creek would make sure that this field would be a shallow pond before long, and their trail would be taken up on the other side of it, somewhere. And she knew, finally, that Martha and the new Nazrak and all of them were finally free. Postscript. Neidre, Hefford, Martha, the scouts, and the young Nazrak successfully returned to live among the Nazrak. Neidre grew in her powers of healing and transformation. Eventually, she went back to the human lands to free the young Nazrak in the very heart of the human capital itself. But that is a story for another time. And that is the story. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed writing about Neidre. She's kind of one of my favorite characters that I've written now. And definitely this is one of those stories I did not think was going to end up being as long as it was. I wanted to write a story about, about someone who, would not have been taught magic, but ends up finding about magic. And then it sort of developed from there. We have the whole Nazrak themes. We have, the themes of the humans being, lording over the demi-humans. The themes of slavery and of, taking advantage of other races and so on. And that was sort of what I wanted to write about. I realized, though, that when we got to the part where Neidre was learning about magic, that the story really wasn't complete, and she needed to, sort of take it upon herself to help, Martha, who was basically the only one who was nice to her back at Caedmon's estate, to give her the option to try to live free as well. And that, that made it a lot more of a complete story for me. And I've enjoyed writing this. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, let us know on Facebook or Twitter, or you can send an email to cryptobiography@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2021, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.